Welcome everyone to tonight's live webinar. My name is Amos. I'm one of the pastors here at FCC. I'm so glad to be able to host you tonight for tonight's talk. This is the first part in a 4-part series where we'll be covering things on relationships. In the coming weeks, we'll be covering topics like how to choose a life partner, what's the purpose of being single, what's the meaning of being single for a season or for a reason, and also aging, how to age gracefully. Those are really interesting topics that will be coming up in the next few weeks, but tonight we'll be talking about interpersonal communication. I think we all can become better communicators and learn how to foster and nurture deeper and more meaningful conversations and interactions. So really excited for tonight. Just a couple of things to know before we get going. One is that we'll be having 2 Q&A sessions, one in the middle and one at the end. So if you have a question that you want Pastor Benny to answer, make sure you ask it by clicking the Ask a Question button. It should be there on the right of your screen. You can also vote for the question that you want answered the most. So that question will be more likely to get answered. I can't guarantee that we will answer it, but it's more likely that we will. So I encourage you to do that as we go along. Make sure you ask questions that you have for Pastor Benny. Well, I'm really excited for this session. I believe there's lots that we can learn. So over to you, Pastor Benny.
Thank you, Amos. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you so much for joining me tonight. I'm going to take you into a very practical series this round, and my aim tonight will be able to offer to you some practical handles on how we can deepen conversations, not only in our family, but also in our cell groups, in our churches, and even in our workplaces. And I believe that the content will be suitable for every one of us. So let me begin by inviting us to just bow our hearts and let's have a word of prayer together. Father, I thank you tonight for wonderful brothers and sisters who have taken the time to come and sit under the sound of your teaching. And I pray tonight that you anoint your servant so that I may deliver your word with clarity, simplicity, but also with authority. And may your word just inspire us to become better communicators everywhere you have placed us, because we recognize how important interpersonal communication is in building and nurturing good relationships. So we commit this time now to you in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Now, let me begin tonight with a funny story that I came across some time ago. Now, the story was told of a rather old-fashioned Swedish lady who was planning to rent an apartment in Florida, in the United States, off the internet, without actually visiting, but just off the internet, she was going to rent it. And after looking at all the photos that were sent, she was quite pleased with it and was almost ready to seal the deal when she suddenly recalled that she hasn't seen any toilets in the photos. And at that point, she wanted to make sure that the apartment was fully equipped with toilet facilities and all that. So she wrote this email to the owner, who happens to be a Methodist pastor. Okay? And in her email, she referred to the toilet as WC. Which in Europe literally means water closet, right? Or a toilet, WC. Well, the pastor didn't know what a WC is because he's over in Florida. But being a Methodist pastor, when he received the email, the first thought that came to his mind was that WC must stand for Wesley Church. So you got to imagine the horror of this Swedish lady when she received this reply from the pastor. Now picture this in your mind, okay? That she is thinking about a toilet, but the pastor is thinking about Wesley Church. So here's what the answer looks like. The pastor wrote, "Dear Madam, I take great pleasure in informing you that the WC is located 9 miles north of the apartment and is capable of seating 250 people at one time. Now, I admit that it is quite a distance away if you are in the habit of going regularly. But no doubt you'll be pleased to know that a great number of people take their lunches along and make it a picnic at the same time. And they usually arrive early and then they stay late. The last time my wife and I went was 6 years ago, and it was so crowded we had to stand up the whole time we were there. And the best time to go is really during the summer, when the most delicate sounds can be heard for miles around. Now, it may interest you to know that right now there is a dinner planned to raise money to buy more seats. And they plan to hold a dinner in the middle of the WC so that everyone can watch and talk about this great event. Now, I would like to say that it pains me very much not to be able to go more regularly, but it is surely not for lack of desire on my part. As we grow older, it seems to me more and more of an effort, particularly in the cold weather. Now, if you should decide to come down to the WC, perhaps I can go with you for the first time, and I will sit with you and introduce you to all the other folks. This is really a friendly community. I look forward to seeing you there. Can you imagine how shocked that Swedish lady would be? And you talk about miscommunication. That is truly a miscomm. And I think it is so important when it comes to the area of communications, because it is one of the most major preoccupation of the human being, right? We are communicating all the time. And when you think about it, we spend a lot of our waking hours communicating, either through speaking or through writing. Now, it'd be good to answer this question. So what exactly is communication? How do we define communication, if you like? I think the simplest definition I have found is one that is written by Myron Rush that goes like this. He put it this way: it's a process we go through to convey understanding from one person or group to another. Now, let me repeat it one more time. Myron Rush said, communications is a process we go through to convey understanding from one person or group to another. And the key word in this definition is the word understanding. Understanding. See, and the whole point of communication is to convey understanding. So, how does understanding occur? Now, unless and until understanding is conveyed, communications have not really taken place. So, listen carefully to me, brothers and sisters. We must not mistake the tools or the means of communication for communication itself. By that I mean this. I can talk to you from now until tomorrow or until my face turns blue, but if you do not understand what I'm saying, communication between us has not taken place. I can write you 1,000 emails, but if you didn't read it, and you didn't understand what I'm trying to say, then communication between us has not taken place. I can make a first-class presentation tonight, but if you did not follow me, if you didn't understand what I'm trying to say, then communication has not happened. So therefore, communications is really a very others-centered process. It's all about the other party that we are seeking to communicate with. Oftentimes I hear people complaining, especially parents complaining something like that. I can't understand my children. They just won't listen to me. Have you heard that before? I can't understand my children. They just won't listen to me. What's wrong with that statement? I tell you what's wrong. If you really want to understand your children, you should be listening to them and not the other way around, isn't it? It is through listening that we can understand. Isn't that right? So, here's my point. The most basic problem we face in communication is this. All of us prefer to talk before we listen. That's our biggest problem. We tend to prescribe before we actually diagnose what is happening. What does the Bible have to say about this? James chapter 1 verse 19, the Apostle James says, "Therefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be quick to listen, slow to speak, and then we'll be slow to anger. Quick to listen, slow to speak, and then we'll be slow to react." You see, so that's the point. After all, you need to remember that God made human being with 2 ears and 1 mouth, which means what? We should be listening twice as much as we speak. See, listening is so important in good communication. It's a starting point. In fact, Larry Spears, in his writing on the 10 characteristics of a servant leader, actually put listening as the first essential of servant leadership. Let me read for you what he wrote in his book. He said, "Traditionally, leaders have been valued for their communication and decision-making skills. Servant leaders must reinforce these important skills by making a deep commitment to what? Listening intently to others. Servant leaders seek to identify and clarify the will of a group. That means it is through listening that we understand what is the will of the group. And they listen receptively to what is being said and also not being said. Listening also encompasses getting in touch with one's own inner voice and seeking to understand what one's body, spirit, and mind are communicating. Listening, coupled with regular periods of reflection, are essential to the growth of the servant leader. Let me repeat that last phrase again. Listening, coupled with regular periods of reflection, are essential to the growth of a servant leader. Since listening is such a critical part of good communication, I want to begin tonight by talking to you about 5 different levels of understanding that comes through listening. There are 5 different levels of listening, and it goes like this. Level 1 is what is known as blank listening. This is when you are physically present, but you are not really listening at all. So you are basically ignoring the speaker. He's talking, but you're not really hearing. Your body is physically here, but your mind is in Afghanistan. It happens a lot during big meetings, and of course, one of the most common places where you find a big crowd listening to somebody talking would be the church. And the church is where we practice a lot of blank listening. And after all, as church people, we have mastered the art of sleeping with our eyes open. So you could be staring at me as I'm speaking, but your mind could be somewhere else, you see. And we all have mastered the art of sleeping with our eyes open. That's blank listening. It's the lowest level of listening, almost not listening at all. The second level is pseudo-listening. This is a little bit more subtle. You are not really listening, but at least you try to pretend to listen, okay? And you hear the sounds, but you don't really comprehend the message. And sometimes we are so subtle, we can still go this way. Oh, right, yes, yeah. But actually, we are not registering anything. You are simply going through the motion. It is pseudo-listening. This happens a lot in phone communication, when you really don't really want to listen and the guy has been going on and on for too long and you start to switch off, but you pretend to be listening. Sometimes it can happen in small group gatherings. And I think nowadays it happens a lot on Zoom meetings, when you are actually separated through a screen and miles away and you can pretend to be listening. That's pseudo-listening. But please remember this. Hearing is with the ears, but listening is with the heart. Listening is really with the heart. Hearing is just the ears, but listening is the heart. If we keep on just hearing without listening, after a while, the people that you're communicating with, they'll be able to sense it, and they will know that they will pick up that you are not really listening, and that is when communication will break down. Okay? Blank listening, pseudo-listening. Here's number 3, selective listening. At this stage, you just hear what you want to hear. You screen out what you're unwilling to listen to, and you pick up what you're looking for, whether it's positive or negative. So if you are out there to fish for compliments, that's what you'll pick up all the time. If you are in a conflict situation, you are just looking out for where the points that you can attack and you can retaliate. And that's where people practice selective listening. Sometimes I think children are expert in this. You shout at them, go to bed, and nobody responds. And you say, anyone wants an ice cream? Everybody heard it. So it's just selective listening. We hear what we want to hear. However, there are times when we should practice some selective listening, particularly when we know that people are criticizing or just gossiping about you unfairly. Those are good times to just practice selective listening and choose not to hear certain things. And there are times when we kind of extend grace by practicing a little bit of selective listening. And you just choose to hear those things that will edify, but discard some of those things that are not meant, they're not true. And there are moments when we do need to practice a little bit of selective listening for the sake of keeping some relationship. Now, here's number 4. Now, this is where we all hope we can go to, attentive listening. This is when you focus all your attention, all of your energy on what is being said. However, at this level of level 4, attentive listening, all the attention tends to go onto the words that are being articulated. So as a result, all the understanding is derived from the words that are spoken. Now, at times, I think that is a little bit inadequate. It can still be superficial in the sense that people don't always, not everything is communicated through words. But what we are looking for will be empathic listening, and that's level 5. Empathic listening is when you don't just listen to the words that are being spoken, but you are literally feeling what is going on. You're hearing the subtle nuances of what is said and also what is not said. This is the highest level of listening. And there are very few who actually touch this holy grail of communication. Sympathy is when we feel for another person, but empathy is when we feel with another person. You can almost identify with the speaker. And this is when our understanding is derived not just from words that are spoken, but we are also hearing the emotions, the feelings, the perception. We are hearing the body language even. We are observing all these things, and as a result, forming a fuller picture of what is being said. And now it is no longer just verbal, but it is hidden communication as well. And I think as Christian leaders, there is a level that we can go even deeper, and that is to learn to listen with the Spirit. And as Christian leaders, we need to listen not just to what is said physically or verbally or even emotionally, but we go beyond to be able to hear and discern what is being said spiritually. What is the Spirit that is pouring forth all these emotions and words? We can then derive understanding not just from heart to heart or mind to mind, but spirit to spirit. And this is why I think oftentimes in deep communication, that counseling and situations like that, we really also need to ask the Holy Spirit to give us discernment so that we can hear not just verbally or emotionally, but also spiritually. And sometimes when we are counseling and listening to people share their hearts with us, we are doing it with the Holy Spirit as our interpreter, because He is actually helping us to see and to discern what is going on. So some of us may be able to master the art of praying as we are listening. So as the person is speaking, inside in our spirit, we are also asking, Holy Spirit, show me what is going on. Show me the heart of this, and we are empathizing with our people, body, soul, and spirit. And then we understand the deeper issues. We begin to perceive the real needs, the deeper concerns. Then we can get to the root of the problem. What really is driving this whole thing? See, so in summary, can I put it this way? I think when it comes to listening, we always practice this. You speak like as if you are right, but you listen like as if you could be wrong. I think that's the best way to communicate. That when it comes our turn to speak, we speak like as if we are right, but when it comes to listening, we listen like as if we could be wrong, so that we stand ready to be corrected, and we can then go deeper. So these are the 5 levels of listening. So I trust that we will go at least to level 4 and level 5. That will be awesome. Now, let me now take you to, as much as there are 5 levels of listening, there are also 5 levels of communicating. So I want to outline for you now what I would call the 5 levels of communication. And this is very important. In fact, I think it will form the bulk of our teaching, the part that you could really apply at home, in your cell groups, in the church, in your workplaces. Okay, so here are the 5 levels of communication that I trust that you will use as a framework to take you into deeper communication. Okay, number 1, level 1 is when we communicate with cliches and niceties. cliches and pleasantries, if you like. At this level, which is a very basic level of communication, we communicate with one another in cliches and pleasantries. Every time we greet one another, we are actually going into cliches and niceties. Things like, hi, how are you? What are we doing? We are communicating, but it's just level 1 communication. You say, how are you? And you will say, fine. What's up, mate? And whatever country you come from, we have different ways of bringing forward our pleasantries, right? How's it going, man? It's cool. What's coming down? Have you eaten? That's the Asian way, right? When we see one another, what do we say? Level 1 communication. Have you eaten? That's the typical thing. Now, even a handshake, a hug, a high five, all these are just cliches and niceties. Now, we can say all these things and do all these things, and yet it can be at a level where it can be totally devoid of true affection or human concern. It's just something we go through. It's just a part of socializing, and it's just something we do. But it can, however, be totally devoid of real affection or human concern. It's a little bit like what Paul Simon sang in the old song. Simon and Garfunkel used to sing this, right? The sound of silence. And one of the verse goes like this. And in the naked light I saw 10,000 people, maybe more. People talking without speaking. People hearing without listening. Exactly what's going on here. Level 1 communication. People writing songs that voices never sing. No one dare disturb the sound of silence. What an insightful lyrics these are, isn't it? People talking without speaking. People hearing without listening. It's just level 1, just being nice. But please hear me on this. At the same time, even though it's just level 1, cliches and niceties communication, it is nonetheless important. It's important, and it's the simplest level in which we communicate with one another. That's true. But even though it is very superficial, very simple, but it is still necessary for the purpose of social interaction. It is necessary. It can still have a very profound impact on human relationship. Let me illustrate for you what I mean. This is a true story. In 1954, Zhou Enlai, at that time, he was the premier of China. He went to a convention in Geneva where world leaders were gathered. And when he came to the conference hall, he was a bit early. And from across the hall, he spotted John Foster Dulles, who was at that time the American Secretary of State. So as the Premier of China, he walked over to this Secretary of State and to greet John Foster Dulles. But when Zhou got there, he stretched out his hand, which is a first level 1 communication, right? Nicety, pleasantry. He stretched out his hand to say hi. But John Foster Dulles at that time drew back his hands. In fact, instead, he drew back his hands, put it behind, and he publicly snubbed the communist leader. And I tell you, it was such a humiliating moment for Zhou Enlai that he never forgot that incident. Historians actually speculated that it was that incident that kept the Chinese and the American government out of diplomatic relationship for almost 2 decades. For a long time, that Cold War was on. And the whole thing, if historians who speculated on this was right, then you know what? The whole thing actually was due to a level 1 cliche communication. Somebody stretched out a hand, the other person didn't take it. And it resulted in diplomatic fallout. Are you with me? And I think this is so important to understand. Even though level 1 communication is superficial, but it is still necessary for busy societies like us today. Can you imagine if I pass you on the street and we know each other, I pass you on the street and I don't even bother to say hi? You come to church and I walk past you and I didn't even bother to shake your hands? How would you feel? You would sometimes walk away feeling like, what's happening here? How can pastor do this to me? And it tells us that even though it is so superficial, but it is necessary. And hear me, if I shake your hands, if I say hi to you, and if I bother to greet you, what it tells me is that we are still on talking terms. It communicates that we are still on talking terms, we are still friends, the door of communication is still open between us. We may be busy and all I can say is hi, but nonetheless, communications lines are still open. Okay? However, we must not always stay in level 1 cliche and niceties communication, but we need to go beyond because it is very superficial. Level 1, cliches and niceties. Let's go to level 2. In level 2 communication, we deal with facts and information. Now I've gone past, hi, how are you? But at this level, much is said, but it is all based on the exchange of information. It's all about things external to the lives of the parties involved. We are just exchanging facts and information about what happened, about an event or about somebody else. Is the subject matter is usually along those lines of something that happened or some event that we both went to or that you go to, I go to. It could be just about somebody else. Now somebody said this, which I thought was a brilliant thing. Somebody made this statement. Great minds discuss ideas. Mediocre minds discuss events. Small minds discuss other people. So let's not be small minds that always just talk about other people. Let's not be mediocre and just talk about events, but let's discuss ideas, and take ourselves to the next level. At this level of just facts and information, we just derive information and facts about what is happening, but we actually know very little about each other. At the end of a level 2 communication, I walk away with more facts and information about something or someone, but I know very little about you, and you know very little about me. And that is why we can't stay at level 2 of facts and information. We need to go to the next level where it involves the risk of a little bit of self-disclosure. So level 3 is when we now deal with opinions and judgment. Opinions and judgment. At level 3, we now begin to attach a little bit of ourselves to what we are saying. We begin to share something that is from within us, within our mind. And this is where we begin to offer to one another our opinions and our judgment. We are not just talking about the event that happened. Now we are asking, what do you think about this event? What are your thoughts? And this is very important. Now we are offering our opinions, our judgment. We are bringing into our communication the benefits of our thoughts, our convictions, our beliefs, and our insights. Now, of course, at this level, there's a little bit of risk now, because whenever we volunteer our opinion, whenever we volunteer our judgment, we stand the risk of being shot down. You may not agree with my opinion, and this is where we take the risk of being able to share our opinion, share our judgment, and be prepared to take no for an answer. Okay, but it is necessary for us to take such risks so that there can be an exchange of values, opinions, and beliefs, in our communication. Then I invite you to go even deeper. Now we go to level 4, which is to do with feelings and emotions. Now, there are relatively few relationships that come to this, but I think as we become good friends, as we deepen our communication, we must learn to speak about our emotions and our feelings. Now, this is where we go beyond just what I think. I begin to share with you how I really feel. What is my emotional response to a situation? You see, when we express our emotions and feelings in a healthy way with one another, I think we begin to go deeper with each other. Now, it's not just what you think, which can be quite clinical and quite cold. I'm now beginning to get into your heart, not your mind, but your heart. How do you actually feel about things? And the key is this: as adults, as mature people, we must be able to share our feelings in an appropriate manner. Now, what I mean is this: if you're a 3-year-old kid and you throw a tantrum, I can understand. But when you are a 30-year-old man and you start rolling on the ground when you share your emotion, I think something is wrong. It's no longer healthy. So there are appropriate ways in which we share our emotions. But when we can express our emotions and feelings with one another, I think we have reached a new level of communication. We are beginning to open up the deeper parts of us, not just my mind, but my heart. And please understand that at this level of communication, it need not be logical, it need not be always objective, but it is a true emotional response to a particular situation. And at this level, we begin to say things like, I just feel very down. I feel totally defeated because of this situation. Because of what happened last week, I'm sorry, but what happened last week really made me very angry. Now I'm expressing my emotions to you. I really like what you just said. It can be positive too. I feel really proud, to get this award. I'm so proud of what our church is doing. So I'm sharing with you deep emotions, and it's necessary to go there. And at this level, there is definite communication. Two persons sharing their feelings and hearing what the other party is saying. And understand that sometimes at this level of communication, when you are sharing our heart with one another, there may be little need for answers. We just need to be heard and know that you are hearing. See, and I used to work as a counselor for a sales force for about 4 years. And the salespeople in that company would actually call and make an appointment to see me. And then when they come, they usually share with me their problems. And what's my job? My job really is to be the best listener that can be. So as a counselor, what I do is I ask them some open-ended questions. And I just get them to share. So you know what typically would happen? What typically would happen is they come, they sit down, and they just open their hearts, and then we go from level 1, pleasantry and niceties, and then we go to facts and information. I ask them what's going on. Then I begin to ask them what is their opinion and what is their judgment of what's going on, and then I get them to share their feelings. And it's at this point, they usually end up diagnosing their own problems, and then they would come up with some possible solutions that they think would help themselves. Then they will, out of all the possible solutions, they select one of their own option, and then at the end of it, they thank me for being a great help to them. What have I done? Actually, I didn't do much. All I did was to ask them questions and let them talk. And then I listen intently, asking them questions again, getting them from level 1 to level 2 to level 3 to level 4. And at the end of it, they feel help. You know why? Because we have communicated. And people are in desperate need to communicate. You see? And that is the lifeblood of any relationship. But then, at the end of it, I hope to take them to level 5. That's the level that we call maximum truth. Maximum truth. The deepest level of communication is when we can communicate maximum truth. This is the point where truth is spoken and heard in its deepest level. Truth is spoken and heard at its deepest level. I can think of a verse that I like to read for you in Ephesians chapter 4. Listen to what it says here. Ephesians 4 verse 25 says, "Therefore, each of you must put off falsehood, speak truthfully to your neighbor, for we are all members of one another." This is the point where we reach a place of so much safety and security that we begin to put off falsehood and we speak the truth in love to one another. At this level 5 maximum truth, what we are doing is this: from the heart, one heart to another, one person to another, we render affirmation. We express appreciation from the depth of our heart. We share dreams, we talk vision, we express our confusion if we are confused. We talk about discouragement, make confession. At this point, we can seek forgiveness, give rebuke, correct one another, and receive correction in return. See, and this is a place of maximum truth. We learn to tell the kind truth to one another, speaking the truth in love. And this is when we reach a point in our communication where the deep felt things in the spirit can be expressed and transparency is achieved. And this is when we can reach the core of our being and we begin to touch where we are hurting. And most husbands and wives have probably reached that point at some point in their relationship where we can have it all out. We go through all those different levels and we come to this place where we finally am able to say, I'm sorry, and to seek forgiveness and to really feel the conviction inside. And then we speak the truth one to another. Relatively few relationships, I think, have reached this level often enough. And we do need to, if we really want to make contact, then we can reach out and actually touch one another. It's when people find the grace to communicate with each other at these levels, then I think deep things begin to happen. And now we are communicating heart to heart, really communicating heart to heart. So let me summarize at this point. There are 5 levels of communication we went through. Cliches and niceties, facts and facts and information, then opinions and judgment, feelings and emotion, and the level we really want to get to, maximum truth, when we can all begin to speak the truth in love. So what's my point? My point is this. Healthy communication between parties is when we can move up and down these ladders with ease and comfort. As time passes, as we grow in our relationship with one another, we must reach this point where we are comfortable to go from level 1 to level 5 and wherever, and to be able to be comfortable at all levels. Now, of course, it would be silly to think that every time I meet you, we must talk at level 5. Every time I see you, I must be, seeking forgiveness, rendering forgiveness, trying to go deep and so deep all the time, speaking to you at maximum truth, speaking the truth in love all the time. I think it'll be too intense. Okay, so I'm not saying that we must always only talk at level 5, but what I'm saying is we need to be comfortable moving up and down the ladder. Okay, and it all depends on the occasion, it all depends on the situation, but at least now we know that we can actually communicate deeper and deeper with our people. Personally, in your cell group, in your family, in your workplaces, use this as a framework so that you can take your conversation with different ones from one level to the next, one level to the next, until we can reach a place of maximum truth. And when you can reach level 5, I know that a breakthrough can take place in your relationship. And this is one way in which we can grow our relationship with one another through good and solid communication. Let me end this portion with what John Powell said, and I think it's beautiful. Listen, let me read for you what he said. John Powell said, I had to be free and able to say my thoughts to you, to tell you my judgments and values, to expose to you my fears and frustrations, to admit my failures and shame, to share my triumphs and victories before I can really be sure that I am and can become who I am and can become. I must be able to tell you who I am before I can know who I am. And I must know who I am before I can act truly and in accordance to my true self. Listen to what this priest is saying. John Powell is literally telling us that we must be able to go up and down all 5 levels before we can know ourselves, and then we can be ourselves. And that's the power of solid, good communication. Cliches and niceties, level 1. 2, facts and information, opinions and judgment, feelings and emotion. Finally, maximum truth. I think this will be a good point for us to pause and then see if we can take some questions before I come back and share with you the last portion. Amos, over to you.
Thanks so much, Pastor Benny. We're sharing that insight and wisdom on how to actually, as you were talking, it's really on how to develop intimacy. Greater levels of intimacy. So. Yeah. Now, before we get to the questions, and if you do have questions, please ask them and vote for your favorite question. The more you vote for a question, the more likely it is to be answered. Yeah. So please do that. But before that, just want to let you know that if you want to partner with us in what we do, because we do these live webinars for free, but we really appreciate it when people partner with us in the work of ministry that God has given us to do. And when you partner with us, we are able to continue to bless the wider body of Christ in these kind of ways. So if you would like to give, you can head to fcc.live. I believe the details are on the screen right now. And you can head there, click on the giving tab, and you can give to our church there. We really appreciate your partnership. Now, to some questions that have been asked. Let's ask this one that's quite popular. Anonymous asks, what do we do if both parties do not have the same level of communication?
Yeah. That's a good question because not everybody is as well developed when it comes to the area of communicating, and I think it's true. However, what I'm seeking to do is to really provide for every one of us some handles in which we could help guide people into deeper conversation. And the key, I believe, is questions. The way how we draw people into deeper conversation is through good questions. So if we ask the right question, we can take them deeper into the next level of communication. Say, for example, someone is just talking about niceties and pleasantries. So what do? What you want to do is to take them to the next level, which deals with facts and information. So you might want to ask something about something that happened, and then ask them, hey, were you aware that this was happening? And then get their response. So it's either yes, no, and then you can begin to ask, oh, were you there? And then that will get them deeper. And then when you ascertain that they were there, they actually experienced it, then what do? We can now ask the next level of question. What do you think about that? That's a good question. What do you think about that? And then after they share what they think, you ask the next question. But now that I appreciate your opinion on this, but how do you really feel about this part of it? And then you are getting them to actually share something from within. And so we are moving people to get them used to talking not just about facts and information or opinions and judgment, but to get them to share their feelings and their emotion. And once people go there and they get used to it, I think we can improve in our communication. And really, we can help people by the right questions, leading them. But keep that framework in your head. It will really help you.
Great. So when you say ask better questions or help guide them to the next level, is it so? Say we're on facts and figures. That's the level of our communication. Right. To go deeper, would we then ask them the next level of communication? Yes. Will we ask questions on that level?
I think you can stay a while in a level and then don't stay there too long. We go into the next level so that we go deeper and deeper. And I think that people build relationship through communication. So over time, as trust is being built, and the way we respond to their responses is also important. So that we can affirm what they say, we can encourage them, and as a result, the trust is built. And once trust is built, people tend to open up a little bit more. So the environment is safe now.
Yeah. Well, I think that leads on to a really good question by another anonymous viewer, who asks, well, how do you respond when the other party is not willing to deepen the friendship or improve their communication as much as you do? So you want to go deeper, but the other party is reluctant to do so. Yeah.
Well, if we are really reaching out to them and seeking to draw them deeper, but they really are not ready to go any deeper, I think sometimes we really cannot force it. Intimacy cannot be forced. Intimacy is something that we give to one another over time as trust is being built, and I do not think that forcing it is going to help. So I would rather wait. I would rather then continue to affirm, continue to communicate, and also model it by myself being willing to open up. I take some risks, even though I know he's not that keen, but I can take some risks to share my heart with the person and see their response. And hopefully, after enough modeling, after enough risk-taking on my part, that person can also open up. And that hopefully will help build the relationship, especially when we are dealing with relationships that we cannot do without. Like our families, cell members, we can't just say you don't want to relate to me, so I don't relate to you. We can't. We had to reach out and continue to build those relationships. Yeah. It's a necessary relationship.
Yeah, I think now, especially with different people with different personalities.
Yeah.
You mentioned trust is a big thing, and some people have a natural higher level of trust than other people. I just feel,
Yes, true.
you know.
Yes.
And some people are just more
Some
reserved.
are just more cautious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so with those people, I think you're absolutely right that volunteering,
Yeah.
showing that vulnerability,
Yeah.
can really help draw that person out and make them feel safe to go deeper into intimacy with you. Do we have time for one more question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, just one more
question, why not?
before we get back into the content. Is it appropriate to have a level 5 communication, maximum truth, with someone of the opposite gender, and you're both not in a relationship?
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Remember when we were going through the webinar on mentoring, I did bring up the idea that it is important that we understand what we're trying to avoid here. So when a man and a woman is talking very deep with one another, what we're trying to avoid is a wrong soul tie and a wrong bonding that is too deep for the level of relationship that you should have. And so what would cause that bonding are two things: frequency and intensity. So what we have here now is intensity. When you're talking at level 5, it's intense. And therefore, you have that one hand already, which is intensity. So can you imagine if you also have frequency? So when the frequency and the intensity is there, you meet very often and you're talking at level 5 one-on-one, the chances of two hands coming together and making a sound is pretty high. And therefore, the bonding will happen. And when the bonding happens, and it keeps on having that bond, it ultimately, bonding, that emotional distance between the two of us will get shorter and shorter and shorter. And at some point, it's going to meet. And usually when it meets, right, it results in a physical relationship. And that is what we want to avoid. So I would say the answer will be yes and no. If there's an occasion where by whatever reason I happen to have to speak very deeply with you and it resulted in a maximum truth level, that's intensity, I must avoid the frequency. Yeah. Then I think it will be safe. But occasionally, as conversations goes, you just, by divine arrangement, you can go that deep and minister to another person. I think it's a God-given opportunity, but at the same time, have the integrity to avoid the frequency so that we don't end up in a wrong relationship. Yeah.
Well, that's good advice. Thanks so much, Pastor Benny. And that's great questions, guys. Continue asking those questions. Continue to vote. Really sorry that we can't get to all the questions, and we won't be able to, I don't think. There's quite a few now. Fantastic stuff. But yeah, keep asking the great questions and vote for the ones that you want answered. They'll rise to the top, and they'll be more likely to be answered. But I think it's time to get back to the content.
Thank
so
you.
over to you.
Now,
Pastor.
before I do that, would it be all right if I just talk to the people a little bit about what's happening? For those of you who are in Singapore, there are a couple of things I wanted to just quickly share with you. Eros Resources have just come up with a new resource material which has to do with the disciples' inner life. Okay, and we have a series of videos, about 8 of them. These are great cell materials if you are interested. We have 8 videos where I actually had a conversation with 2 of my pastors to talk about the inner life. And those videos are going to be made available. And along with the video, there will be a workbook where you could actually talk through some key things about the area of the inner life. And it will cover things like the different arenas of the inner life. We talk about the devotional arena, talk about the arena of motivation, contemplation, preoccupation, restoration. And we talk about the concept of having margins in our life with the ultimate goal of knowing God. And it is beautifully structured into a workbook that will guide you through the entire discussion as a cell group. We will cover things like the scriptural foundation. We give you some structured framework, which is where the video comes in. And then shared application, some summary code, specific actions that you can take as an individual and as a group, and then sources that we can refer you to. So if you are interested in that, you could actually go to the Arrows Resources website and you can pick up this content. And for those of you in Singapore, if you do wish to also participate in the giving, we do have a pay now thing that you could actually contribute to if you want to. It's going to be on the screen right now. So if you want to use that, if you want to just give to Arrows Resources and support us, we would really appreciate that as well. So thank you so much. You can take a video of it or just go to the UEN number that is given on the screen. Thank you. Well, are you ready to come back to the next portion? I have just a few more ideas to pass to you before we end tonight. Now, we have talked a lot about the 5 levels of listening, the 5 levels of communicating, and now I want to give you some barriers to effective communication. Now, sometimes communication breaks down because there are barriers that are there. And it'll be good for us to identify what some of those barriers are, and so that we can avoid it or even kind of be aware of it when it is coming up in our communication. So here are 5 barriers to effective communication. Number 1 is this: existing wrong emotions. There could already be emotions that are negative between parties, and we need to be aware of it. And when there are negative emotions that are already there, it really affects what we hear and how we say things. So be conscious of the existing wrong emotions that could already be there. If you have already been offended by another party, in that communication, it's going to come forth. And it may color the way that you hear and color the way that you speak. So be conscious of existing wrong emotions. And sometimes there may be a need to go to level 5 and admit it, that I'm actually upset with you, and then really deal with it. Existing wrong emotions. Number 2 are underlying prejudices. Now, we all have our prejudices, either culturally or ethnically. We all have our prejudices, and it's good to be aware that if we do have some prejudice, we should be conscious of it and deal with it. Other times, communication breaks down because we hold differing values. What is important to you may not be as important to me, and vice versa. Inappropriate words. Sometimes communication could have been hampered because we use words that are inappropriate, or when we start to use swear words and when we start to use angry words. There are words that are inappropriate, and it actually can break down communication. We want to avoid that. We should always speak to convey understanding. And in our conversation, we always seek to generate more light than heat. What's the point of generating heat and getting everybody heated up with words that are feisty? But why not generate light and help people to understand where you're coming from? So it's therefore important to choose the right words in our communication. The other thing is our tone. Communications is so important when it comes to the area of the tone. Sometimes a mistaken tone can really communicate the exact wrong idea, the opposite idea. You need to understand, if I can draw a picture for you right now on the board, that people actually derive understanding in different ways. If I can just show you a little diagram here. I think about 7% of our understanding when it comes to communication is derived through our words. Okay, 7% comes from our words, but about 38% actually comes from our tone. So the way that I say those words communicates a lot. And you actually pick up the communication. About 38% comes out of tone, but about 55% actually comes out of our body language. Okay, our body language makes up about 55% of our communication. So think about this. 7% only is derived from words, 38% derived from tone, and about 55% derived from our body language. Okay, 7%, 38%, 55%. So when you think about it, the total communication, a lot of it comes from what I see in your body language, your facial expression, how you carry your hands, your body tells me a lot. And the tone, sometimes a wrong tone can really communicate the wrong idea. Only 7% comes out of our words. So here's an important key to better understanding. For a start, please remember it is helpful to note that there is a difference between hearing and listening. Let me define for you where the differences are. Hearing is a word used to describe the process where our ears receive info or data and then transmit it to the brain. So what is hearing? Hearing is simply the process of our ears receiving data, receiving info through words, and then transmitting it to the brain. That's hearing. Okay? But listening refers to a more complex process of me not only hearing, receiving the data, transmitting to the brain, but also to interpret it and to understand the significance of what I've received. That is listening. So hearing is with the head, with the ears, but listening is with the heart. See, I'm interpreting, whatever I'm hearing. In other words, I can actually hear you without listening to you, but I cannot listen to you without first hearing you. See, because there are two different levels altogether. So may God make us not just a hearer, but a listener. Okay? Now, if you want to practice really good listening, again I come back to the concept of listening because how we listen is going to make up such a huge part of our communication and building of our relationship. The practice of good listening involves a few things. Number one, correct posture. Correct posture. So if I'm listening to you intently and attentively, there are a few things that my posture, because remember, 55% come out of my body language. So if I really want to listen to you intently, I will incline my body forward. So if I'm sitting in a chair, I lean my body forward so that I can hear you. Now I'm going to give you now very practical things so that you can practice it and then improve our communication and listening. Right? So you incline your body forward and immediately you communicate to the person, I am here, I'm leaning in to hear what you have to say. Okay? And learn how to face the speaker squarely. So rather than to lean on one side or to sit side by side, we sit facing one another and leaning forward so that I'm really listening intently to you. Have you ever noticed that in cafes, they always have round tables, put two chairs on round tables, and you notice the women love to take those tables. Why? Because women understand this. Women are better listeners in some sense. I don't want to stereotype here, but women tend to listen better and they like to sit facing each other. And then as they listen, they lean forward, they hear one another. But you know how men like to talk? We like to sit on a bench, okay? Amos on one side, I'm on the other, and then we talk into the air in front of us. But we are listening to each other, but we are talking into the air in front of us. Okay, we had a tendency to do that. But if you really want to listen intently, I think it's very important that we learn how to incline our body towards the person and listen in, facing the speaker squarely, and seek to maintain eye level so that I'm really listening to you. Keep eye contact if possible. As a person is speaking, you are watching him and you are responding to him. Keep the appropriate body movement. so that you are not distracting him, moving here and there, leaning forward and backwards, but just sit still, watch the person, listen, and respond. Watch out for the surrounding environment. And this is where if I'm having a meeting with a fellow staff member or something like that, I don't like to meet them across the table. I would rather come around and we put 2 chairs so that we can speak to one another without any barriers in between. Because environment plays a part in listening as well. And I would want to give them focused attention. So can I recommend you one good thing you can do? Maybe keep the phone away for a while. So that we can give one another focused attention, especially when we are dealing with an important subject. So that's just correct posture, okay, physical posture. Okay. Number 2, practice correct prompting. So as I'm listening to you in the right posture, I am sitting, facing you squarely, looking at you eyeball to eyeball, leaning forward, helping you to understand and leaning into you. I've got all that, no barrier between us. Now the next thing is I need to now respond correctly to what you're saying. Okay, so examples of correct prompting would be use door openers. Okay, for example, we can use a description of the other person's. If I'm trying to get you to speak, I could notice the other person's body language and then use it as a door opener to get you to speak up. For example, I could say, "Wow, your face is beaming today. What's happening?" So because I notice you're smiling away, you're beaming, so as I just mentioned that and then say, "What's happening?" Immediately I can get you to tell me what is going on, and then we can go from there. If it's a negative situation, I could say something like, "Oh, you look rather troubled today, Amos. Is anything wrong?" And that's an invitation, it's a prompter for them to start communicating. See? And then after that, when you ask something like that, use the power of silence to work for you. A brief silence will work for you. So say, for example, if I say to you, "Hey, David, you look troubled today. Is anything wrong?" After that, I need to pause for a while and let the person decide if he wants to tell me anything or not. So if I ask and say, "Hey, Amos, is anything wrong? You look troubled today. Is anything wrong?" I wait a while. If I hear nothing, say after 10, 15 seconds, it's becoming awkward. I need to be able to then offer another opportunity, something like that. Well, when you feel like talking, about this, I'm happy to listen, and then drop the matter there. So we are actually keeping the door of communication open and allowing the person to be able to know that if I'm ready to talk, someone is willing to listen. That's this. I hope that makes sense. Now, if they want to talk, then if they start to respond to you, then great. Adopt the correct posture and begin to listen with correct prompting. Okay, but we can issue an invitation to talk or to allow them to continue talking. Right? Number 2, then if they begin to talk, then use the appropriate responses. And by that I mean use things that will prompt them to continue talking and let them know that they are being heard. For example, I may say as the person is talking, I may go say something like, "Yeah, tell me more," or "Yep, I hear you. Really? Wow. Oh, that's really hard." Respond to that every now and then, so that people know that you are hearing them. Okay, and so if we just sit and listen without any response, after a while, it feels like a monologue. So you do want to listen, but give the necessary prompters to keep them coming and keep them opening. Okay, and number 3, if you do want to ask a question, if you feel like you want it to go a little deeper, ask the right question. And the key is this: use open-ended questions. In other words, questions that allow the speaker to give a response other than a yes or no answer. So I would rather ask, "How did you feel when this thing happened?" Now, that is an open-ended question. How did you feel when this happened? And then the person can say whatever they want. Rather than to say, "When this happened, did you feel bad?" Then what's the answer? The answer is yes or no. And that is a conversation killer. So rather ask open-ended questions so that people can respond whichever way they like. And that will take you on The stream of conversation will continue. But once you have a yes or no answer, then the answer is yes or no, and you have to keep the conversation going after that. See? So use that. Then number 4, always use attentive silence. The listener needs to learn the value of attentive silence in freeing up the speaker to think, to feel, and express himself. So don't be afraid also to allow moments of silence when the speaker needs to think and needs to process something before he could express himself well. The Jewish people have a saying that goes like this: the beginning of wisdom is silence. The beginning of wisdom is silence. The book of Ecclesiastes actually tells us there is a time to speak and there is a time to keep silence. And that's true. And by the way, we are going to start a new series in the book of Ecclesiastes coming from this Sunday onwards. If you want to come and have a listen in to our series on Ecclesiastes, come for it, because it's going to be an amazing series. Now, let me come back to this. The effective listener is able to do both. Okay, but I want you to note that, however, if you are able to respond to them and prompt them to keep them coming, but also at the same time you will know when you should keep quiet and allow the person to process and to think before he responds again. Okay, but also note that excessive silence, however, can also be undesirable because it can backfire on us when there's too much silence. Silence, when it is overdone, is no longer golden, but it can show a lack of response to the person who is speaking. So just learn how to balance attention with all this. So those are the few simple prompters I would like to leave with you so that you can be a better and better listener. Now, before I finish, I want to give you some tips that can perhaps help all of us. And I really want to make this as practical as I can. I know that these are all very practical things we need to practice. And here are some tips to build interpersonal communication and build relationship, as it were, within our family, within ourselves, within our church, and even our workplaces. Okay? And here are a few simple things I'd like you to think about. Number 1 is this: always make it a practice to greet people. If you want to build interpersonal relationships within your family and workplaces and all that, make it a practice to greet people. I think it was Bill Hybels who once said the most important part of any meeting is not just the agenda, it's not just the time of sharing. The most important part of any meeting is the hi and the goodbye. And I think he's right, because it's important that we step into a room, we step into a meeting, that we actually greet people, because you bring everybody into the meeting. And when it's time to say goodbye, don't just go home, but we make our presence felt and we say goodbye to greet everybody and then farewell everybody. And it builds relationship over time. You know how is it like, right, when our children bring their friends and visit our home, and especially when their friends come and they just step into the room, step past every one of us. We are all sitting there, we are at a dinner table or something, they just walk right past us without even greeting us, and they just go into our children's room and they start having their conversation. How would you feel? You don't feel good, isn't it? We all like to be greeted. And I think it's important, make it a practice to greet people. Okay, whether it's goodbye or whether it's hello. Number 2, to build good communication, level 1 kind of communication, always practice a good handshake. Practice a good handshake. Please don't give people a limp fish for a handshake. Give them a solid grip, and so that people know that you are sincere and you are actually greeting them. Number 3, good to remember names. If you really want to build relationship over time, build trust, everybody loves the sound of their own name. So practice the art of remembering names. I have a church. We belong to a church with more than 1,000 people, and sometimes I stand at the door and I really try my utmost to try and remember names and remember the stuff that happened in people's life. And you imagine how much mileage you get when you're able to greet someone whom you don't always meet, but maybe you only meet once in a blue moon or once in a month, and then you can call them by name. They will appreciate you to no end. Sometimes I try to remember if someone whose son have just graduated, and they tell me, oh, my son is going to graduate next month. And then I meet the same person 3 months down the road, and I still remember the incident. And I ask the person, hey, John, your son has graduated, isn't it? Has he found a job? You know what that communicates to the person? That you really care, because you remember names, you remember incidences that happens in people's life. These are it builds interpersonal relationship. Number 4, when you're talking to people, okay, if you do get a chance to even greet one another, level 1 communication, maintain discreet eye contact. And I underline the word discreet. Please be careful where you fix your eyes on, okay? Don't make people feel awkward. So look at them in the eyes if possible. That's the best place to look, okay? And number 5, be genuinely interested in others. People know it. If you're genuinely interested or you're just going through the motion, people know. Number 6, good practice in communication. Do not interrupt others. We all have a tendency to do that. I tend to be a fast speaker. Sometimes I would do that too, unconsciously. Someone is talking, and as the person talked, I had a great idea. And before he finished, I jump in to offer my idea. And those sort of interruption really is not only disruptive to communication, I think it can be rude as well. So make it a point. Number 6, do not interrupt others. Number 7, in every interaction that we do, from level 1 to level 5, we seek to make relational deposits. Now, let me explain what I mean by this. With every chance we get to interact, we either deposit something emotionally into them, into their emotional bank account, or we will withdraw something. Okay, yeah, occasionally at just level 1 kind of communication, you may end up with neutral, where you don't deposit, you also don't withdraw. But one of the best things we can do is always seek to put an emotional deposit every time we communicate with people. You know how you do that? One good example, encourage them. In fact, the very word encourage is a compound word, en, which means in, entry, entrance, in, then courage. See, so every time I encourage you, what am I doing? I'm pouring courage into you with the words that I say. So can you imagine if you encourage the person when we talk, that person is going to go away with his emotional tank a little bit more full. Why? Because you have just made a deposit. Every time you affirm, every time you compliment, every time you encourage, you are putting a deposit into their emotional bank. And we should aim to do that so that people walk away fuller than when they first met you. That will be a good communication goal for every one of us to follow. Number 8, okay, manners makes the leader. Your manners makes the leader. So mind your P's and Q's. Even as leaders, we must always remember that. Mind your please and your thank you. In interpersonal communication, take the trouble to just say please, would you, kindly. Words like that are powerful, and they actually add value to your relationship building. Same with our emails. Sometimes when our emails can be so curt, Amos, can you get this done for me? That is different from, hi Amos, would you kindly help me to get this done? I just added 2 words, but it makes a world of difference, right? Can you get this done versus can you kindly help me get this done? That makes the person feel valued. It makes the person feel that respected. It makes the person feel that it's a request and not a demand. You see, and words like this, they are just manners actually. They are just good manners. And if we do that, I think it will help build our relational deposit. And lastly, learn to walk with slow feet. By that I mean this, we are always rushing from point A to point B, and sometimes in our rush, we walk past people without even noticing them. We walk past things without even realizing that that's happening. But if we were to just learn to slow down our pace, just walk a little slower. You might observe a bit more things. And then as a result, spot opportunities for a conversation, spot opportunities to create an avenue for interpersonal communication. So my friends, I have given you all that I hope will be able to, there are practical pointers that I hope will be able to help you build better communication. My challenge to you would be, please don't just take notes and file it away, but why don't we practice all these pointers so that within our family, within our church, within our cell groups, we can all learn to have deeper communication. The deeper our communication is, the deeper our relationships will become. Thank you for listening tonight. And I'll be happy to take any more of your questions if you have them. So Amos, back to you.
Thanks, Pastor Benny. Well, certainly there's a lot there, and I certainly have a lot that I can learn and put into practice. I think it's really practical, which is really good. And there are quite a few questions, and if there's more questions, please ask them now, and vote for your favorite questions. But yeah, one question is by Anonymous.
Yeah.
This is going back to your levels of communication, the 5 levels of communication. And they ask, are these levels of communication a good measure of the strength of a relationship?
Okay. I would put it this way. Yes and no, in terms of using this as a matrix. Yes, in the sense that if we become skillful in being in interpersonal communication, we would want to use this as a framework to bring people deeper, but please be able to move up and down so that we don't mechanically kind of engineer this, but learn to see that, yeah, there are these different levels, and I'm trying to bring people up and down where appropriate, deeper and deeper and deeper. So in that sense, if communication is a tool for building relationship, then I would say that yes, it is a good measurement of how deeply we can communicate. But having said that, there are other things that help to build communication apart from just conversation. There are sometimes people bond not just over what they say, they bond over what they do together. So there are also other things like just serving together, working together, holidaying together, going out together, eating together. These things also add to the whole matrix of relationship building. Yeah. So I'm just using communications as one of those avenues in which we build relationship. Yeah. So to keep that intention. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Pastor, for answering that question. I think communication is just one aspect of intimacy.
Yeah.
There's so many other aspects. That form
even praying together. Could be building spiritual intimacy that we may not be able to achieve through just words that we speak to one another. Yeah.
Well, you covered a lot on how we can be better communicators, like posture and all that stuff, prompters and that kind of thing. But this is a good question. What happens when it's one-sided? How do we deal with a situation where the party only wants to speak and they don't want to listen? When you speak, they cut in.
Yeah.
It's kind of one-sided. It's not ideal.
Yeah. Actually, I do have friends who are a little bit like that, and every time we have conversation, I can hardly get 2 words in. And after a while, it can actually become quite tiring. And there may come a point where because sometimes people don't have that awareness that they are actually dominating a conversation. So there may be occasion and where we actually have to say, is it okay if I just share my thoughts here? With words like this, sentences like this, you could get them to actually become aware that I'm dominating. And then they create the room for you to actually go deeper. And to actually share your opinion. And if they interrupt you, which they would have a tendency to do with people who dominate, then you may have to say something like, is it okay if I finish my thought? And then in that way, you are also training them to become better communicators in the course of the whole process, I think. So we are here to disciple one another, actually. So might be good if we can help our dominating friend to become better communicators themselves. Yeah. So that's what I would do. If I come to that point, I have no option now, I would actually ask them, is it okay if I share my thoughts now? And then if they interrupt me, is it okay if I finish my train of thought? Yeah.
That's good advice. And usually they're not offended by it.
No,
usually
because
they
they
just become
know.
aware.
They know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. This next question is close to my heart.
Yeah, okay.
Chin Carling asks, how can an introverted person learn how to communicate to a higher level? And I'm assuming by introverted, he's specifically, or they're specifically referring to more reserved people.
Yeah. You see, I think when it comes to, for more reserved people, first of all, you need to realize that being able to speak a lot of words doesn't necessarily mean that you are the best communicator. Because I think the right words spoken in the right measure at the right time for the right reason will achieve the right purpose. And you can actually encourage with just few words if you say the right things. Now, having said that, I think especially those of us who are in leadership position, and communication is so important in leadership. If you know that you're an introvert, you may have to make the effort to actually train ourselves to relate to people and to train ourselves to go deeper and to almost force ourselves at the start to actually uncover and share until not so much because we love having to do it, but because it's a necessary process of being a leader. In fact, I think you should share your experience being an introvert and yet a pastor at the same time. How did you handle that in your own experience?
Yeah, I was thinking about it as I was looking at the question. One of the things that I did was surround myself with people that are really good and natural at it.
Good.
So I kind of learned from them, but they also help draw it out of me. And so from there, I get almost a practice because I'm just surrounded by all this. My wife is
good one.
Really outgoing person,
Yes.
very talkative. She's very vulnerable.
Yeah.
So she helps me. But I think you're right. At some point, it does come to the point where you kind of have to force yourself to do so, and you kind of have to make the decision to unveil yourself.
Yes.
To intentionally go that step deeper. Otherwise, no one would do it for you.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And the truth is this, as I get older, I actually find that I have less and less capacity to become very outgoing. More and more I'm getting, more and more introverted as I get a little older. And I have less capacity now to just be like a party animal anymore. But yet, at the same time, as a pastor, I do recognize that I need to relate. And so I do it sometimes out of responsibility, not just fun. Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Pastor. Now this question, I think is quite a personal one to this person.
Okay.
They say, I listened to my mum's grievances sincerely, but at the end she kept saying she regretted sharing all these things with me, and I felt unappreciated. And I'm guessing here, but I believe the question is, what do they do then? In that situation, what do they do? Your advice?
Well, I would say that, first of all, we can only control the controllables. So there's some things that are beyond our control. Our desire to reach out, our desire to listen in to a person is definitely a good thing. I think it is honoring to God that we actually seek to reach out to the people that we love and to listen to them. And after they pour their heart out, sometimes they regret it and they may not appreciate the fact that you have listened in, and now they may even feel that you have used that information against them or something like that. And when those moments happen, I think we can only say, I can only control the controllable. I can't control how another person feel. And I also don't want to become resentful about what I've just experienced, but to try to be understanding. Maybe I can draw a picture on the board just so that you could see this. You see, when we relate to people, we need to understand that there are 3 levels that we can relate. Firstly, on the outside, we always see people's conduct. That's one, our conduct. But if you have any level of depth at all, you will know that our conduct is actually driven by our character. See, who we are drives what we do. But sometimes we would have noticed that people can act outside of their character. Sometimes the conduct and the character don't match. Like normally the person is not like that, but why is he behaving like that in this instance? But it's because there is something deeper than character that can drive our conduct, and it has to do with the condition of the heart. There's something deeper, which is the condition of the heart. And sometimes people are going through pain. People are going through trauma. They're going through some kind of a hurt. And because they are hurt, it drives their behavior, and that behavior can be outside of their character. That normally they are not like that. But because of the hurt, if it kind of drives them to behave in a way that's outside of their character. And we may be too fast to judge if people sometimes do things to us that is out of a hurt. But we can understand that they are hurting people hurt other people. And if we understand that, we find more grace to be able to let go of certain conduct and character that is not becoming, even of people that are above us. Yeah, so if we understand that, maybe we'll find greater ability to let go and to forgive. And that may be something that's happening right now in your situation. Yeah.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Pastor Benny. As you were sharing all that, and even tonight, it is almost to be a better communicator. It actually starts with us, as you shared. It's a lot on our part, but it's almost how we conduct ourselves and how we communicate starts with our character and our condition as well. Yeah.
Or else, what's inside can affect what I'm hearing and how I respond to things.
Yeah. The next question is also really good, and I'd encourage you guys to. I think we have a bit more time left to just vote for whatever questions you want to be answered. Okay. We'll try to get to them if we can. And there's quite a few questions that have not been rated yet, so please do rate them, especially those that are a bit new and haven't been rated. But this next question is, if we already know that there are differing values, how do we enter into an effective communication? And I think this is particularly pertinent, say, for Christians trying to relate to, say, a non-Christian. When the starting point, we're not on the same starting point, especially when we talk about faith.
I would think that when we are seeking to communicate with another person, and there will always never be total coherence of values. But however, in communicating with people who have different values from us, I need to be able to acknowledge the strength of another person's value, even though it may be different from me. But if I do see honestly that there are certain good things about that value system, that value, I must be able to acknowledge it. But at the same time, I must be able to speak about my value and to be able to present it well. And this is where we use that principle. I speak like as if I'm right, but I listen like as if I could be wrong. So in my speaking, I'm confident, I'm clear about what are the values I hold, and I'm seeking to communicate that with my friend, including my Christian values. And I want to communicate it in such a way that it makes my Christian value attractive also from his point of view. But at the same time, when I'm listening to him sharing his thoughts, I must listen in like as if I could be wrong too. So when I come across that way, he will feel that he has been hurt. But so when I tell him what I think, he would also be more responsive to listen. So in that way, I think we can have a good conversation, although we may not be on the same page when it comes to values. But at least he heard what I have to say, and I heard what he has to say. And we can both walk away respecting one another's opinion and difference of value. And hopefully, I'm able to convince him that and present my values in such an attractive way that he can hear it. And this is where the deeper side of how I communicate my emotions, my care for him would come across. And as a result, maybe I could get him to think otherwise. That's our hope. And we pray that the Holy Spirit is working at the same time as I'm speaking. But our goal is to be the best communicator that we can be and present our values in the best possible light.
Yeah, I think you're right. Especially with those people who don't have the same values as we do, and we're trying to enter into a meaningful conversation. Everyone just wants to be heard. And I think communication is immediately cut off when they feel that you have all the right answers, or you are just talking at them rather than having a conversation. So
I remember Ravi Zachariah once made this statement. He said that there's an Indian proverb that goes like this, after you cut off somebody's nose, it's no point giving him a rose to smell. So what he's trying to say is that after you offended somebody, it's no point after that trying to tell him how good your message is or how lovely your Savior is. You have already offended the person. So I always think that the message that we preach can be offensive, but the messenger must not be. The message we carry can be offensive because it is counterculture, etc., but the messenger need not be. So we should be as unoffensive as possible in terms of our demeanor, in terms of the way we speak, but yet the message, the truth that we present can be offensive.
Well, I think we have time for maybe one more question.
Okay.
And again, so sorry if we do not get to your question. There are lots of good ones here. But yeah, I think there's one question. Maybe I'll slightly rephrase this one. How do you deal with, say, older people who refuse to process what you're saying, or maybe to listen, or it feels like it? Say a parent or a leader.
Wow. Can I check if that came from my children?
Well, they could be under a pseudonym.
Oh, well, if I have to deal with someone who is actually not wanting to listen and not wanting to process, well, again, we can only control the controllables. And I actually find that if I posture myself right, and then I speak to my superior or speak to someone who is in authority over me, if I can posture myself right, I usually get a better response. If my superior is feeling that I am threatening him with my line of questioning, there can be a barrier that comes up. So one of the things I like to do is to try and always give the older person, give your superior a way out. That means don't put him in a position where he feels trapped and he has to sort of admit so many things, but put him in a position where he could have a way to salvage his own dignity, so to speak. And so one of the things I like to do is to couch my objection in the form of a question. So rather than to state that this is so wrong, I would rather say, do you think that this other way is a better way? What do you think of this other thing? So I'm trying to present it to him as a question rather than an opposing idea if I know that the person is not a very open person. Now, of course, there are some leaders that are very open, very willing to debate ideas, then go for it. But if I'm dealing with someone that I know is not wired that way, then I want to give him the room to be able to own that idea by couching it in the form of a question or to put it in the form of, a query. And I think that may have a better response than to trap him, in a battle of ideas. So that may be something you want to try. If you know that that person is open, then go for it. But if you know the person is not, then maybe give him some room to maneuver.
Good advice, Pastor Benny. And I think, if I may ask maybe a related question, just to end off the night, because I think a lot of the questions that had to deal with non-ideal situations when the other party is either angry or there's raised emotions, and I think we haven't really asked that. What happens, any advice when we're dealing with a situation where either party is very angry or upset? What would you advise us to do?
If I'm the upset party, I'm really upset, I may want to be able to call a timeout because I'm in control of that situation. I'm angry already. So if I have self-awareness, I might be able to say, we need to continue this conversation, but I don't think I'm in a good frame of mind to do it. So can we talk tomorrow or can we talk later? And then I call a timeout. That is just to protect myself from coming into a place of sinning. I think we can be angry and not sin, and don't sin. In our anger, don't sin. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. So what do? You call a timeout if you are in control. But if, let's say, it's the other party that is angry and he is letting it all out, I think I would first just cool off. I need to be able to practice selective listening at that point. I know he's upset. I let him vent a bit. And then after that, I would say something like this. I would say something like, I'm sorry that that's how you feel. I think we need to continue this conversation. But perhaps let's do it when we are both in a better frame of mind. And then we call for a timeout. I think it's always good to call for a timeout when people are really upset. Because the tendency is when we are upset, we say things we don't mean and we end up sinning. So in your anger, do not sin. A soft answer will turn away wrath, but angry words can trap us. So it will be wise for us to call a timeout. If you are angry, call a timeout. If you are not the person angry, even more so, call a timeout. And cool off before you talk again.
Well, thank you so much, Pastor Benny, for sharing with us your thoughts and advice on how to develop deeper and more meaningful conversations and relationships with one another. I think there's so much we can take away there and put into practice. So I hope that you've been blessed. I believe you have been, and hopefully you walk away and can start putting into practice right now with your friends and your family. Well, before we go, just a little shout out. If you would like to partner with our ministry and what we do in doing stuff like this, doing live webinars and blessing the wider body of Christ for free, you can do so. Head to fcc.live and click on giving, and you can just follow the prompts there. Also, follow us on Facebook. Just search Faith Community Church Perth, and you can follow whatever we do. You can even tune in for our live service and check out our new sermon series, Ecclesiastes. That'll be super interesting. That's starting this Sunday. You can do that and stay up to date all on there. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Next week, we'll be talking about how to choose a life partner. That's going to be a very interesting one. It always is. And so make sure you tune in. Same place, same time. So look forward to seeing you there. God bless. Have a great night.